Hello, thanks for joining us once again for Talking Europe on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Now, when we talk Europe, we don't just mean the EU's current member states. There is currently new wind in the sails of the movement to enlarge the EU into the Western Balkans region. Now, one major recent development has been a name deal for one of those countries, North Macedonia, as it is now set to be officially known. Neighbouring Greece had for many years been opposed to the use of Macedonia, the name of one of its own northern regions. Now the deal is done, though. What is the state of play on the EU's enlargement into the Western Balkans? What's the interest for the European Union in taking on new members in a region that was at war less than 30 years ago? Well, here to debate the issue are two MEPs, Stelios Kouloglou from Greece's ruling Syriza party. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening.
And with you, Alois Bidela, who is and was first Prime Minister of Slovenia after the breakup of Yugoslavia, now an MEP with the European People's Party. Hello.
Hello.
Well, just to clarify things for our viewers, the Western Balkans, it's a name given to the region that includes the states that used to make up Yugoslavia minus Slovenia and with the addition of Albania. So there you go. We're all straight about what we're talking about. I just want to talk, gentlemen, first about North Macedonia. That deal recently signed off by North Macedonia, by Greece, after some very long struggles. Mr. Kouloglou, your country most closely concerned with this. I'll come to you first. Do you believe that North Macedonia is now on a path towards European membership?
Well, you know, you have the extraordinary chance to speak with a traitor, because I agree, I fully support the agreement between Greece and North Macedonia. In Greece, I'm accused of being a traitor.
It has been very, very passionate debate, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, both by the extreme right and the neo-Nazis, but also by the Conservative Party, which belongs to EPP. The party of my colleague, I'm afraid to say. And I think you should have pressed them to adopt a more, conciliatory stand. I know opposition is always an opposition, but there are some limits. If it's about, international and national issues, important, not to make, cheap demagogy, etc. But yes, to come back into your question, I think this is an historic agreement. It's a model for resolving international disputes through negotiations and mutual compromises. And I think Mr. Zaev and Mr. Tsipras deserve international recognition and the Peace Nobel Prize for 2019. There are actually candidates they have been nominated for that. And I hope my colleague will support the candidacy.
How do you feel about this? A slight accusation there. Not of you personally, I believe, Mr. Kouloglou, but the European People's Party didn't step up to support the Greek push for this name deal, perhaps?
European People's Party did many efforts in order to do progress, and finally, so we are pleased that two governments were able to reach a deal. There are still sensitivities in the air, and that is the terminology I don't like, but the blockade is over. And now the way towards European Union was offered even in Thessaloniki 15 years ago, but then the way was blocked, and now we have a new situation, much more relaxed, and of course, these deals does not mean that North Macedonia would jump automatically into the Union. There are conditions, there are reforms to be done, but the situation is significantly changed. Now the progress can be done.
Well, I'd like to talk about the general issue of Western Balkan states as a whole or individually seeking EU membership. There's a lot of enthusiasm here in the European Parliament for bringing about reforms in that region, bringing these countries into the EU eventually. But it has to be said, this is a region where there was war in the 1990s. We know that there are tensions. There's this very passionate language that we've been speaking of, accusations of people being traitors, even sort of ethnic tensions that are still very real. Mr. Kuloglu, why would it be interesting for the European Union to invite this into its house?
To complete the transformation and the unity of Europe.
Fill in the blanks in the map,
Yes,
so to speak.
but also because it's a very fragile region, you know. This is where the First War started, and this is where the last war in the Europe we had, you know, started again in 91 and then in 99. So we need, so it's very, very important for these countries to be stabilized. And one of the reasons and of the ways to be stabilized is to enter the European Union, of course.
Do you agree? Because looking at the Eurobarometer poll, 43% of the EU public support further enlargement generally, but 45% are opposed to enlargement. And that wasn't looking at this specific region where there are known issues.
European perspective was offered to those countries 15 years ago. And we have to be credible on both sides. And I would say when one country is ready, then European Union should be ready as well. This was the situation or the model for other enlargements. All these countries belong to Europe, historically, geographically, culturally, and we know, I agree with my colleague, that there are still possible sources of conflict development, and there are other players which were not that strong 5 or 10 years ago, Russia, Turkey, some other countries, and those countries don't play always in line with European interests. So there is no better option than European future for all these countries, and we know what happened, what caused the history, and I think that we have to invest now. If we will not be attentive now, then we will pay more in the future. So it's time to act now, but we know the conditions and the countries know the conditions as well. It's up to them how to proceed.
Well, I'd like to talk about one specific case, because of course several countries, lots of different issues. There are some issues on the road to enlargement, certainly. I'd like to run a report now about one of the several border disputes that exist in this region currently. The presidents of Serbia and Kosovo have between themselves discussed the option of an exchange of territory. Our Balkans correspondent Laurent Rouy has this report for you from that border zone.
Bujanovac in southern Serbia has a mainly Albanian population. This large village could become part of Kosovo, while the north of Kosovo, with its Serb majority, could be annexed to Serbia. The two presidents have seized on this idea as an exit strategy for negotiations on Kosovo's final status. The Albanian council in the southern Serbian settlement is in favour.
We've shown a will to be equal with all other, with majority, but we're done of treating the Albanians as secondary grade citizens.
Kosovo Serbs are concerned about this. The Serbian Orthodox Church is opposed to border change. The majority of Kosovo Serbs live in the south and wouldn't benefit from any land swap.
This will probably mean an exodus of Serbs from this area. And as we have seen, population exchanges have always been accompanied by tragedy and victimhood.
France is among the European countries who are not opposed to the initiative, provided a full agreement is reached. But analysts warn that this could be destabilizing.
What will happen with Serbs living in Bosnia? What will happen with Serbs and also with Albanians in Macedonia? And not only the region, because we have these ethnicities that would like to have some kind of independence or join other countries all over Europe.
This idea of the Serbian and Kosovo presidents seems to be a lone initiative, and nobody has forgotten the breakup of Yugoslavia when every redrawn border resulted in deadly violence.
Well, gentlemen, I'd perhaps like to come to you first, Mr. Pitele, as a representative of a country that was once part of Yugoslavia, which you just heard about at the end of that report. You know, these territorial exchanges, it's actually a population exchange, isn't it? We're not just talking about redrawing lines on maps. There are people involved here. One leading Kosovo newspaper editor, Agron Bajrami, said that a Kosovo-Serbia land swap is ethnic cleansing by another name. This is really bringing back issues that we saw led to deadly violence in the 1990s.
I wouldn't exaggerate in that way, because if two countries are able to agree on something, this would be the solution. And I remember when Lady Ashton began with talks between Belgrade and Pristina, many analysts and politicians said mission impossible. But there was a dialogue, there were some solutions, there were some agreements, and well, what else we can expect or suggest than the two countries agrees, then recognize each other and so on.
But when we talk about countries agreeing, we actually mean governments agreeing, don't we? Not the actual people who are actually living in those places.
They have both democratically elected governments, and I don't see any automatic consequence that if there is an agreement, then anybody on one or the other side should pay for that, because each identity has to be protected in Kosovo or in Serbia, regardless the agreement.
Well, you know, I have a different opinion, you know, because exchanging territories in 21st century in Europe is something, you know, it's quite unusual.
But we don't speak about forced change.
Okay, yes, but this is a result.
Right, yeah.
This is a result of ethnic cleansing by two sides. And if the agreement is done, we will have a new ethnic cleansing by the remaining elements of Serbians living in the southern part of Kosovo, and also from the Albanians living on the north. And this is the result of this disastrous against the national law intervention, military intervention in Yugoslavia in the late 90s, you know, in 1919. Because this provoked this, you know, the ethnic cleansing and all the other stuff. Of course, Milosevic has been a dictatorial regime, but we cannot use force to solve international disputes.
Well, Mr. Pitele is saying it wouldn't be force. It wouldn't be force. Mr. Pitele is saying if an issue resolved between governments is not forced.
Yes, but we are facing a very unusual situation because of the force that has been used in the Yugoslavia, in the former, what it remained of the old Yugoslavia.
Milosevic used a lot of force.
Of course.
That's the problem.
Yes, but we cannot, as a civilized international community, we cannot respond to the force by using more force. And this is, now we have to solve a very delicate problem. Because once you start changing frontiers and territories in Europe, then where is the end? Is there any end? If are Russia and Ukraine going to exchange territories? Are we going to support this issue? You know,
in Ukraine it was not done in a peaceful way, but who can impose solution to those two countries? It's much better if they are able to agree in a democratic way with the dialogue to have a solution which would lead to mutual recognition and common European future. Yeah, one cannot hate a neighbor and love Brussels at the same time. This is not the European way.
Well, one thing that I think there's a lot of agreement, even among the very pro-integration European Parliament where we are here, is that the Western Balkans still do have a lot of reforms to carry out, as are asked of all countries that ask for accession. For example, the European Commissioner for Enlargement, Johannes Hahn, said, in all of these countries I face a certain reluctance to address properly rule of law issues. This is a must for the EU. And he said the member states are becoming more and more impatient on this issue. Mr. Kuloglu, isn't the timeline kind of tight? Perhaps it is time to be decisive on some of these issues.
No, we need to be cautious, and it takes time. It takes time because this part of the world, this part of Europe, is victim of the history. It's victim of the history of its geopolitical situation. You know, there have been wars there. Wars have devastated the countries, so it takes time after wars to be, you know. Slovenia, of course, escaped quite easily, I would say, with the smart moves that have been made by the first.
We had good government.
Yes, by the government. But other countries, they fell in the middle of the war, like Bosnia-Herzegovina. Bosnia-Herzegovina is a result of the wars. The situation is very bad, but we have to be cautious and have patience to wait for the things to change. We cannot change it with a magic European stick from one day to the other, you know.
Well, just finally then to you, Mr. Pitula, Jean-Claude Juncker said that accession hopes keep war at bay, essentially. It's not a direct quote, but he said something along those lines quite recently. Accession, the idea that this region could join the EU one day is keeping the peace. Is that how you see things?
Yes. I think that he was clear. I would say that each country is competing, first of all, with itself, not with somebody else, with other candidates. The conditions are known. It is known what has to be done in order to reach full membership. At the moment, we have quite a symmetric situation, very different statuses of different countries. We have to consider entire region and I think that things will move because there is no better alternative.
All right, thank you both so much. We're running out of time, but I'd like to thank you, Stelios Kouloglou and Alois Pitula, for being our guests on Talking Europe. Thank you for being with us as well. Don't forget you can watch our programmes again on our website, france24.com. For now, we'll say goodbye.